Every nation in World War II had its gallant heroes and much revered medals that it bestowed upon them. For the British, it was medals like the Victoria Cross or the Military Cross, and for the Americans, it was the Medal of Honor or the Silver Star. These all meant the same thing, that a person wearing it had displayed heroic yet blatant disregard for their own safety in the face of overwhelming odds, and as a result, well, they were a pretty bloody good soldier. But what about Germany? What did it bestow upon its most distinguished soldiers? Well, that would be the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. Introduced on September 1st, 1939, it was available in 5 ascending degrees of distinction: the Standard Knight Cross, the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, the Knight's Cross with oak leaves and swords, the Knight's Cross with oak leaves, swords and diamonds, and finally, the Knight's Cross with gold and oak leaves, swords, as well as diamonds. In total, a mere 7,167 Knight's Crosses of all types were awarded during the war, which, given the fact that over 13.6 million people served, really shows just how much of a big deal this was. So, who exactly were those gallant few, and what did they do to earn it? To answer those questions, well, 5 stories of Knight's Cross winners. To get a feel for the kind of soldier who won the Standard Knight's Cross, let's begin by looking at Heinz Paul Adolf. Adolf lived an ordinary middle-class life until nationalistic fervor led him to enlist with the military in October 1935 at the age of 21, initially serving in the 17th Motorized Pioneer Battalion as a private. He did well here, and in May 1939 he was made an officer and promoted to second lieutenant. A few months later, he would also get his first taste of combat as his unit was dispatched for the invasion of Poland. Combat proved to be most exhilarating for Adolf, and so he requested to transfer to a branch that would put him right back in the thick of it, the paratroopers. He graduated jump school in July 1940, having come top of his class, and after taking up a new posting with the 7th Pioneer Parachute Battalion, he was subsequently deployed for the invasion of Crete in 1941. Through Crete, we start to get an idea of the brutal and efficient soldier that he was becoming. You see, Adolf was blown far away from both his men and his munitions during his descent, leaving him with nothing but his trusty Luger pistol to defend himself. Complicating matters was the fact that he became wrapped in his parachute as he hit the ground, forcing him to have to deal with 2 intercepting British soldiers while barely able to move his limbs or see where he was aiming. Given this then, it shouldn't be surprising to learn that Adolf shot up the ranks in the coming years and earned himself a mighty heavy medal chest for his troubles. He was promoted to second lieutenant and captain in 1941 and 1943 respectively, and as for medals, by 1943 and following a deployment to Russia, he had been given a total of 7 medals, but not the Knight's Cross. Yet. Just before we continue with today's video, I want to thank our fantastic sponsor, Tiege Hanley, who will help you develop a consistent skincare routine that will leave you feeling and looking fantastic. They've got the ultimate solution for guys like you and me, helping us start and maintain effective skincare routines without any fuss. Look, I recommend start off with the level 1 system. With that, you get the daily face wash, you get a bi-weekly exfoliating scrub, you get an AM moisturizer, which has got SPF 20, and also a PM moisturizer. Plus, each box has got an instruction card so you know exactly what to do with the stuff that you've been given. Tiege Hanley have over 7,000 5-star reviews worldwide, so they're clearly doing something right. Plus, as a member, you get to enjoy perks like at least 20% off, customizable boxes, exclusive deals, flexible subscription options, and free US shipping. So thanks to Tiege Hanley for sponsoring today's video, and they're offering an incredible deal. Just click the link in the description below and you'll get a whopping 30% off your first box, plus a fantastic free gift. So don't miss out, click that link and get started. And now back to today's video. That would come in July 1943 while serving in Italy. Here, Adolf parachuted into Sicily in response to Operation Husky, the Allied invasion of the island. Commanding 2 companies, he took up a vital defensive position at a bridge on the Simeto River. Him and his 300 men succeeded in repelling attack after attack by the British, but each attack killed a few more of his men, and he soon became aware that he was locked in a battle of attrition, one in which the numbers were stacked against him. He fought on, only choosing to abandon the position when he lost the last 88mm flat cannon. But before he scarpered, he wished to blow the bridge to slow the British advance. To do this, he had a pair of 2,000-kilogram bombs loaded into the back of a truck and volunteered to personally drive them into the bridge. Then, with British gunfire whizzing all around him, he hopped in the back in order to set them off. He had improvised a timed detonator for this purpose that would allow him time to escape, but it failed. So he did the only thing he could do to keep the bridge out of British hands. He pulled a hand grenade out of his belt, gestured for his men to retreat, and pulled the cord, blowing the bridge and himself apart. For this action, he was posthumously awarded the Knight's Cross on March the 26th, 1944. Now, through Adolf, we've gained an idea of the feats that had to be undertaken to just get the entry-level Knight's Cross. So now, let's move on to see what had to be done to win a higher level of the award. On the other end of the spectrum to Adolf, we have Hans Ulrich Rudolf, the sole winner of the Knight's Cross with golden oak leaf swords and diamonds. Rudolf was a man drawn to a military life out of fanaticism with the foul ideology that had overtaken his nation when he was 17, Nazism. He enlisted with the Luftwaffe as a pilot in 1936, and after spending a few unnoteworthy years as a reconnaissance pilot, he found himself behind the controls of a Stuka dive bomber, and it was here that he came into his own. From furious battles over the Kursk salient to the desperate defensive actions during Soviet advances in 1943 and 44, everywhere Rudolf flew, destruction followed in his wake as he went about his obsessive crusade to spread Nazism through the bomb and the bullets. He proved to be so good at this, in fact, that ultimately he was credited with the destruction of 519 tanks, a battleship, a cruiser, and a destroyer, along with numerous other military assets. He embodied a lethal efficiency in the skies that few, if any, could match. Rudolf's preferred weapon of choice was not bombs that the Stuka was famous for, but rather the pair of 37mm anti-tank cannons that were often equipped to the aircraft's later variants. He racked up most of his kills with this weapon, but was not averse to using bombs as and when the situation called for it. So effective a pilot was he that his kills with just bombs, his less preferred weapon, tallied significantly higher than most pilots got in their entire career. Even when Rudolf was shot down or forced to land due to damage to his aircraft, a situation he found himself in no less than 30 times on account of him hurling himself into terrifyingly dangerous situations, his determination to return to the skies and fight for his evil cause proved unyielding. On numerous occasions, he escaped capture by the enemy or embarked on grand treks through the wilderness just so that he could return to his unit and take to battle once again. His awarding of the highest level of a Knight's Cross in January 1945 was not for a single act of gallantry, as we saw with Heinz Adolf, but rather for consistent gallantry throughout his career. When you learn more about what this specific rank of the award was meant to be, this makes sense. Only 12 of them have ever been intended to be awarded, the idea being that they would be presented to the 12 best soldiers of the entire war once victory had been won. But obviously, victory never came, and with defeat looming as the war went into 1945, the decision was made to get some use out of the awards that had been sat gathering dust for several years at that point. After all, they'd been monumentally expensive to produce, each one being made using real gold, 58 diamonds, and 68 sapphires. Thus, Rudolf found himself the only recipient of the highest level of Knight's Cross. His glory ultimately would be short-lived. Germany surrendered only 4 months later, and post-war Germany did not look favorably upon Nazi fanatics like Rudolf. He escaped the gallows post-war and lived out the remainder of his days as an unrepentant and ever more maligned and ridiculed Nazi apologist, eventually going to the grave a complete pariah in 1982. For our next winner, let's go to the top of the hierarchy and see how it looked when a senior officer was awarded a Knight's Cross. After all, opportunities to coat themselves in glory were few and far between for such individuals, and thus the parameters which they were awarded it proved quite different. Specifically, let's look at the case of General Hans Valentine Hube, an old boy by World War II standards. He first joined the army all the way back in 1909, initially serving the Kaiser in the Imperial Army. He was a competent soldier from the offset, as attested to by his ending World War I with both the Iron Cross First Class and Second Class pinned firmly to his chest, the Iron Cross being an older and lesser award to the Knight's Cross. He remains in the army following the nation's defeat, successfully transitioning from the Weimar-era Reichswehr to the Nazi-era Wehrmacht without any gaps in his service. Throughout this period, he remained with the infantry, serving initially with the 1st Royal Saxon Reserve Division and latterly with the 16th Division. A reputation for delivering results with minimal losses gained during World War I led to him shooting through the ranks, and by the onset of World War II, he found himself a regimental commander and soon enough a general. Eventually, he found himself on the Eastern Front, where continued results with minimal casualties earned him the Knight's Cross on August 8, 1941. With no disasters following, Hube was then conferred the Oak Leaves on February 17, 1942, Swords on January 21, 1943, and Diamonds on August 19, 1943. Hube's achievements in this period are too many to summarize in this video, but a typical example of his approach can be found in the quagmire that was the Battle of Stalingrad. This was a battle that went rather badly for the Germans, and as most of Germany's senior military leadership called for more and more men to be fed into the meat grinder, Hube was one of the few voices that accepted the dire reality of the situation and called for a strategic withdrawal, a move that, if heeded, might have salvaged the battered 6th Army. In the subsequent years of the war, this ability to manage complex retreats while preserving crucial manpower and material came to the fore time and time again, with another great example being during the Sicilian campaign in 1943. Here, facing an Allied onslaught, he masterfully orchestrated the Etna Line defense and managed a withdrawal that simultaneously preserved German forces forces and hampered Allied advances. This reveals something interesting then. Whereas lower-ranked soldiers were typically awarded the Knight's Cross for gallantry, as we saw with both Adolf and Rudolf, senior soldiers, many of whom would never fire a shot in anger throughout the entire war, were instead awarded it for strategic competence, consistently delivering results that shifted the course of entire battles rather than individual skirmishes. As for Hube, his impressive career was abruptly ended on April the 21st, 1944, when his plane crashed, killing him instantly. Oh, one can't help but wonder, with a track record like this, had he lived any longer, maybe there would have been a second Knight's Cross getting its golden oak leaves. So far, every Knight's Cross that we've discussed has been awarded to someone relatively senior, a general, a pilot, some kind of officer at the very least. But that was not always the case. The Knight's Cross could be, and was, awarded to soldiers of all ranks. To demonstrate that fact, let's now dive right down to the bottom of the hierarchy and have a look at Heinz Berger, a mere lance corporal who found himself awarded a Knight's Cross. He was a man who had all the makings of a life most unremarkable, a lowly country boy who knew his place was by his father's side on the family cow farm and was more than content with that. He was too old to have been forced into the Hitler Youth, and too young to have any bitter memories of the previous conflict, and so when nationalistic fervor gripped his nation with the coming of Hitler, Berger was largely unaffected. Politics was something for city types. It made no difference to his life who was in charge in Berlin. The Nazi war machine had other ideas, however, and with big things on the horizon, it was only a matter of time until call-up papers landed on Berger's doorstep. The day finally came in September 1939, just after the German invasion of Poland had begun. Berger did what most young men in his position did. He went along with it. After all, he had never even left his village. He saw it as an excuse to travel, meet new people, and have a bit of an adventure. After completing his basic training, Berger found himself assigned to the 87th Infantry Division, a completely unremarkable soldier in a completely unremarkable unit. He quickly had his naive notions of war shattered once he had his first taste of combat in France in 1940, but all in all, it was an experience he found tolerable, thanks largely to the camaraderie of his newfound friends and occasional high moments, such as being one of the first German soldiers to march into Paris. But this completely normal and unremarkable story changed forever following the Battle of France, when Berger found himself promoted to Lance Corporal and given a new job, triggerman on a 37mm anti-tank gun. Then, his combat experience, coupled with his overall meh attitude to the horrors of war, came together to make a damn good soldier as he began to rack up kill after kill during Operation Barbarossa. This came to a head between August the 30th and September the 1st, 1941, when Berger, positioned in the challenging terrain west of Yartsevo in Russia, found himself with the seemingly insurmountable challenge of staving off a relentless advance of Soviet armored units and infantry. As mortar shells rained down around him and bullets whizzed overhead, he kept a cool head and carried on shooting. High explosives for the infantry, armor-piercing for the tanks, again and again. All in all, in this one prolonged engagement, he knocked out 13 Soviet tanks and completely stalled the Soviet advance in that sector. Add to this the 12 other confirmed kills of the campaign, and Berger had knocked out a total of 25 tanks not even 2 months into the campaign. Such an action immediately won Berger the attention of his superiors, and he was immediately recommended for a Knight's Cross in recognition of his bravery, which he was awarded a little under 3 weeks later on September the 17th, proving that a soldier of any rank could win a Knight's Cross. They just had to be seriously brave if they were down in the ranks. As for Berger, he was taken into captivity by the Soviets following Germany's surrender. He was subsequently released in 1949, and having had his fill of adventure, he returned to the family cow farm, remaining there until his death in 1983. So now that we have a good understanding of the general trends of Knight Cross winners, let's end this video by looking at something that completely breaks the mold: the foreigners who got awarded it. For a regime as racist as the Nazis, it certainly raises a bit of an eyebrow that one of their most coveted medals would be handed out to non-Germans. So let's look at some examples of foreigners who were awarded it and see what trends we can spot. First is Finnish Field Marshal Carl Gustaf Mannerheim. As the commander-in-chief of the Finnish Defense Forces, Mannerheim played a critical role in both the Winter War and the continuation war against the Soviet Union. The Nazi regime and ally for the latter war were eager to keep sweet to help strategic coordination on the Eastern Front, and so giving him a Knight's Cross was a bit of a no-brainer. Another prominent recipient was Benito Mussolini, the fascist leader of Italy. As one of Hitler's primary allies, it's perhaps no surprise that Mussolini was honoured with the medal. Fascists of a feather flock together and all that. Tsar Boris III of Bulgaria was another foreign ruler to be bestowed with the medal. Although Bulgaria maintained a stance of neutrality for much of the war, its geopolitical position and occasional alignment with Axis objectives meant that its leadership was occasionally recognised by the Nazi regime. Boris was seen by Hitler as a man de facto on his side, even if he didn't want to risk his kingdom by formally joining the conflict. thus his award. Then there was Arn Antonescu, the leader of Romania. Under his leadership, Romania became a key ally to the Nazi regime, and his efforts in supporting the German war machine, particularly on the Eastern Front against the Soviet Union, earned him the prestigious award. It's not just individual leaders, but also units from other nations that were recognized. For example, the Spanish Blue Division, Spanish volunteers who fought alongside the German army on the Eastern Front, had several of its members awarded the Knight's Cross, but these units were integrated into the German military, not fighting separately like the Finns. No enlisted Finnish or Romanian soldiers would ever get the medal. To get it without being a leader, you had to be German, even if only by allegiance. Though the parameters by which foreigners were awarded the Knight's Cross are now quite clear, wear our uniform or be someone we want to butter up, it still raises an eyebrow that foreigners were eligible for the Knight's Cross at all, given Nazism's rather well-documented penchant for something called racism. Just before you go today, quick reminder to check out T. Shanley by clicking the link in the description and getting 30% off your first box. Thanks to them for sponsoring, and thank you for watching.